Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with another brand new Takara Tomy release, and this time this isn't part of the Jurassic World line. We've got just a standard Takara Tomy figure, and I absolutely love when they do this because they give us some pretty cool species from time to time, and as you can see today, we've got ourselves a Dilong. There aren't all that many figures out for this species, so having a Takara Tomy version with articulation is definitely something that is really fun. You can see as we move around the box, you've got some nice images of the figure, some information here on the back and everything. Basically your traditional Takara Tomy box. You can also see that it's quite small, which is to be expected considering it is a Dilong. So let's pop the box open and we'll check it out. So contained within the box we have two cards, one of which is in English, which is a plus for us, and you can see basically we have some information on the card as well as images and everything. The back is basically just, a cardboard sort of thing going on, because that's what the cards are really, is just cardboard slips that are included. But then we've got ourselves the Dilong itself, and I must say it's actually kind of a cute little figure compared to your standard Takara Tomy figures. I think it fits right in with your usual type of stuff, but again is pretty decently sculpted overall. It's got a pretty fun paint scheme to it, nothing overly incredible, but decent enough, which is also nice, and overall just looks pretty much as I expected. Maybe a little bit less appealing than I expected, but not too bad. The one thing that I think is kind of disheartening is I figured the feather detail would look a little bit better on the final product, where it's just kind of muted on this one, but it's not the end of the world, I guess. So we'll go ahead and jump to a closer look and we'll check it out a little more thoroughly from there. So starting up here at the head sculpt of the Dilong, you can see it looks okay. The one thing I can see I'm not a huge fan of is the way that this yellow kind of coloration here for the lower jaw runs along and just has such an abrupt kind of stop before transitioning to the black. I mean, there's not really even a transition. It just straight up changes to black, which isn't really that natural in my opinion. But I mean, maybe it is. It could be like the type of color that, and like the type of patterning you could see on a real living Dilong. But I just feel like it looks unnatural for some reason. But you can see overall the detailing in the face looks okay for what it is. You've got a red eye with a black pupil. You also have like this yellowish tone again for the lower jaw leading up into the upper jaw. Then you've got a black, and then you have a light variation of a brown up here on the top of the head. Unfortunately, the detail on the top of the head is quite muted, and the paintwork is kind of applied a little bit thick, so that definitely doesn't help matters. We do have an articulated jaw, which is nice. That's about as far open as it goes. You can see the teeth sculpted on the inside of the mouth. In typical Takara Tomy fashion, they're all kind of sculpted together, but they are at least a little bit easier to kind of decipher compared to the recent Scorpius Rex they had released, where the teeth were just kind of a big jumbled mess. Although the paintwork is definitely applied a little too thick on the figure, you can see the teeth a little bit better, I think, on this one. We can also see a pinkish tone for the inside of the mouth. We've got the tongue in there and everything, and you don't really usually ever see too much in the way of fine detail on the inside of the mouth on the upper side, but you can see it a little bit. You can really make out the teeth actually from down here. It's another one of those figures where I feel like if you repainted the mouth, it could look a lot better. And one thing that is really cool about this, as you can see, is we actually have neck articulation, and that's pretty impressive for Takara Tomy. That's not something you see too often unless a dinosaur has like a long neck, like their Argentinosaurus or a Therizinosaurus or something like that. You normally don't get neck articulation with these figures, so it is nice to see this one having that kind of articulation, and you can turn the head completely around. Again, you can swivel it the entire way through. Obviously, it can't go forward and back or anything. It's just swivel articulation, but it's at least something that's a little bit new for Takara Tomy in their articulation aspect. As you lead down through the neck and everything, though, you will notice that the detail is definitely quite muted. Like the feather detail kind of gives me the feeling of, something you see often when it comes to dinosaurs and their feathers, having slightly shaggy, kind of emu-like feathering, but not like overly shaggy, just that style of feathers. But as you lead down, you will notice again that it is quite muted as a whole. Unfortunately, and something I've been complaining about lately when it comes to these Takara Tomy figures, as you move down into the arm, you can see a super obvious seam. So this is another one of those situations where I feel like the ability to articulate the arms would have just made sense, because honestly all they had to do is take this piece, pop it in there, and you already now have articulated arms. But for some crazy reason, they decide to glue them in there so you cannot move them, and it makes no sense. And now, you know, with this one specifically, you've got one arm kind of outstretched, which is weird, and one arm held into the body, which just seems awkward and kind of looks out of place for the figure. I feel like if we would have just had the ability to articulate the arms, it would have been so much better. And considering they have the articulated neck, you would think that that would have just been an obvious decision, but unfortunately not so much. But as you move down, you can see the black tapers off to that yellowish tone that we have up there in the face. As we lead down into the arm, you can see the muscle definition and everything, and as you lead into the fingers, we can see kind of like some scoots moving down the fingers, and the fingernails are sculpted pretty decently, but unfortunately unpainted, which is kind of uncharacteristic, I think, of Takara Tomy. Usually they have painted nails on their figures, but as you continue to move along, you still see that same style of feather detail again, with that kind of fine but sort of scruffy feathering leading down through the thigh. You can see the muscle definition, as well as again that very soft feathering. And then as we move down, we again transition as we move further down into the leg. Basically halfway down the calf, we transition back to that yellowish tone, and we lead into the foot. You can see the foot has kind of like some scoots down the toes. You've got the nails again sculpted pretty decently. You can see the dew claws sculpted out and everything back there. But yet again, no nail paint, sadly. We do, however, have articulation in the legs, which is a plus, and they can move pretty nicely forward and back. As we lead back up into the tail, we do of course have that ball joint that we always have for Takara Tomy, but on the plus side, this one only has one ball joint. Sometimes you get two areas of articulation in the tails of these figures. This one has only one, which does again look a little bit better because we have less kind of, you know, breaking up the tail as you move out, but still the ball joint again, which can allow you to move the tail left and right, and if you twist the joint right there, you'll then be able to go up and down. And then you also see as you lead out, we have a very nice bright orangish tone as you lead out there toward the tip of the tail, which actually has kind of like some feathering out here at the end of the tail, a little area of plumage out there on the tip of the tail, again with that orangish tone. And as you move along the underside of the figure, you can see again that black returns, but then transitions back to a yellow for the underbelly of the dinosaur. And honestly, it looks kind of ill on the underside, like it looks starved to death for some reason, and almost like a decaying corpse on the underside of the figure for some reason. But then we transition back again to the black. I think the black tone should have just been the entire underside of this, because I don't really want to look at the underside under here. It just looks for some reason very awkward, and again like a dead dinosaur that's been decaying for a couple of weeks. I don't know. But then when we come up here to the side, I think it looks a lot better. Very strange. But overall, it's kind of a fun figure. Definitely not one of Takara Tomy's best, but still kind of cool. As far as the size goes, for a length, you were looking at about 4¼ inches, or around a little over 10.5 centimeters, heading toward 11, but not quite there. And then for a height, about 2¼ inches, or right around 5.5 centimeters for a size comparison. There is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect A Human Being next to our Dilong from Takara Tomy. And I think one of the coolest parts about this figure is the fact that when you see it next to Muldoon there, you can see it's almost, not quite, maybe a little bit too big, but almost in the same size range as the Mattel line. I mean, I think you could probably still use it as being, you know, like right there in that same size range, but I feel like it is just a little bit too big, but it's really close, so that's definitely a really fun aspect of this figure. As you can see, we have a Mattel Velociraptor and Dilophosaurus in here next to the Dilong as well, which you can see these Dilong could make some pretty cool prey choices for your other dinosaurs in the Mattel line. And then just to give you one final comparison next to your standard size Takara Tomy release, you can see with the Scorpius Rex standing in here next to the Dilong. The Dilong is obviously a bit smaller than most of the, Takara Tomy dinosaurs usually are, but that also helps, I think, to give you even more respect for how nice the figure looks as a whole. So this Takara Tomy Dilong figure is pretty fun, honestly. I think it is a nice figure as a whole, with a few issues. For the most part, I think the color scheme looks nice and natural that they've chosen for it. The only thing about that I'm not a big fan of would be the way that the yellow on the face transitions to the black. It's just so abrupt, and there's just something that looks really quite off about that. I don't know exactly what it is, but it does look a little off. But overall, I feel like the color scheme is fairly nice and naturally chosen. It's also nicely applied. I really would have liked to have seen nail paint on the figure, but I guess that's not the end of the world. And if I really wanted it, I could just do it myself. Wouldn't take much effort to apply that. But overall, the coloration color scheme is pretty decently done. The other issues that I have with the figure are the arms. The arms look kind of weird. They're kind of strange as far as the placement goes, and they should have been articulated. It makes no sense to me not to do it, but I am excited to see that there is neck articulation in the figure, and I really hope that Takara Tomy continues to do that moving into the future with their releases, because I would really like to continue to see that. We also have articulation in a few other areas moving throughout the body, helping to make this dinosaur a little bit more posable, which is really fun. And again, the fact that it sizes up close to being accurate next to the Mattel figures is also really fun. So overall, it is a pretty cool figure and definitely a nice species choice from Takara Tomy, and I look forward to whatever other species they might be creating at some point in the near future. So of course, let me know in the comment section what you guys think of these, and if I can find a link to include in the description, I will definitely do that, so you can grab one again and add to your collection if you want. So make sure you check the links that I can potentially add to the description, and of course, like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.